Law enforcers of Reddit, what is the craziest you'll never believe me story that a suspect victim told you that actually turned out to be true? Get a complaint of a burglary from a guy we deal with from time to time who has schizophrenia. The guy says someone broke into his house and stole like $0.38 in change from his coffee table, 2 slices of cheese from his fridge, and 2 Tylenol gel caps. The interior of the guy's house looks like something off of a hoarder show, so I ignore the guy and let him fill out a statement form for an initial report that I plan to bury in a file because he's obviously having problems with not taking his psych meds. 2 weeks later he calls panicking, get dispatched back out to his house. This time he's missing around $0.72 from his coffee table, a can of Vienna sausages, and 3 doses of his prescription heart medication. Same thing. I let him rant and rave about being robbed and he asks repeatedly what he can do to stop this from happening. I give him a half-thought answer like that he should invest in cameras for his house, take his statement and leave. Another week passes, get sent out a 3rd time. Same random items missing, spare change, a fishing lure, and half of a bologna sandwich from his fridge. This time he's smiling and keeps saying we got the some ch this time. He pulls back a blanket from beside his recliner and it's a monitor, attached to 6 or 7 cameras around the inside of the house. Pulls up the video and sure enough a guy slides his kitchen window open and lets himself in. He takes loose change from the coffee table, steals 1 fishing lure, and takes a bite out of the dude's sandwich in the fridge before opening the fridge back up and taking half of the sandwich. Turns out to be another schizophrenic that lives down the road from him. I went to a report of a mentally disturbed person who called police reporting that the devil called and told him to kill people on the streets and then kill himself. I checked his previous police files, and he had massive history of mental health issues. He was taken to the mental ward many times and was diagnosed with a form of paranoid schizoaffective disorder. Anyways, my partner and I show up and talk to the guy. He's sweating bullets, eyes darting around, trembling and totally terrified. He explains that for the last 6 years, the devil calls him nightly via telephone and then when he calls for help, the police take him to the mental institute. He says the devil tells him to kill people then kill himself. As we are about to call our mental health unit to come talk to him, the phone rings. My partner answers the phone at the guy's request. Guess what? Some freaking bastard was using a voice changer and pranking this dude with mental health issues for years pretending to be the devil. I can't tell you how surreal that moment was. The poor man's face change, kind of like he's finally been vindicated and he knows it's not just in his head. So we investigated that pranker and eventually charged him. The guy who had called was so freaking happy. Dude, that's fricked up. A frequent flyer would call in at least once a week telling us people keep wanting to have sex with him and won't leave him alone. We would send someone out there and he would always be alone and it would be unfounded. One night he called and said he was at the store and a man keeps asking to have oral sex with him. We go out there and nobody else is there, but he said the person left and gave us a license plate number that had a local address. We went out there and the address was for a funeral home. The vehicle was a hearse, and the hood was still warm. After talking to the mortician he confessed to soliciting the guy. For once the guy was telling the truth. I'm just going to pretend they were all legit. The man can't leave the house without being propositioned for sex. It's made life crippling and the legal system thinks he's crazy. Cousin works in a city with mountains nearby, stationed at the foothills substation. She gets a call about a spacecraft landing at her house. Very slow day, so she decides to humor her dispatch. At the house, hysterical woman talking about invaders from space greets her, and my cousin rolls her eyes. However, she says she can show her the spacecraft. Old lady takes my cousin out about 200 feet from her house, and there, in her backyard is an impact crater. Turns out it was a mini satellite that survived re-entry. This should be further up. I work loss prevention for a major retailer. Working LP one day and I see a juvenile female selecting multiple items without looking at price. Something that is a cue to me to start watching closely. She takes the cosmetics out of the packaging and then goes into the fitting room with one shirt. I get another officer to watch the cameras and I make my way out to the floor. The female exits and I check the stall. Nothing in there except a shirt. I head out to the entrance and wait for her to exit. As soon as she exits, I identify myself and ask her to return. The tears started running down her face and she begged me not to call the police or her mom. Told her that I would at least have to contact her mom. I call her mother and she says she is disabled and cannot get out of bed. I ask if there is anyone else that can pick her up and she sends a family friend. During the interview with the female, she said she is having a really hard time and that she was really sorry. Giving her the benefit of the doubt, I decide not to charge her on the grounds that she remains trespassed and doesn't get into trouble with any other retailer. She agrees. A few days later I get an envelope with a letter. It says thank you, and again how sorry she is. She explained the reason she took the cosmetics is because her mother has stage 4 cancer and only has weeks to live and couldn't bring herself to ask for money from her mother because she is so sick and very broke. It honestly broke my heart. I framed the letter and keep it in my office as a reminder not to judge people quickly. Make all new hires read it as well. Every one of them have the same who cut the onions and here look. Friend of my parents worked for law enforcement as a psychiatrist for a time. An older lady was brought in one day, extremely distressed and yelling how her family wants to see her locked up in a psychiatric ward and take hold of all the silver mines she owns. My parents' friend went through the hassle to check the story, just to be sure. Turned out to be 100% true. Lady was not one bit crazy. These are not my pants. As we were cruising around town, we spotted a guy, Jim, wanted for questioning in relation to breaching an intervention order. He was in the passenger seat of a car with some other guy we didn't know, Bob. We pull the car over, arrest Jim and put him in the back of our car. As we're searching his car and Bob, Jim was one of our local drug dealers, I find a point of ice in Bob's pocket. So I'm telling Bob he's under arrest for drugs and he looks me dead in the eye and says, "Officer, I swear to God, these are not my pants." I almost laughed in his face. "You can't be serious. That's the best you can come up with." But again he said, "I swear to God, these are not my pants and that's not my drugs." Apparently Jim and Bob had a big night drinking at Jim's house and Bob had misplaced his pants before passing out. When they woke up, Bob grabbed the first pair of jeans he found and drove Jim into town for some macas, totally unaware of the drug in his pocket. A likely story if I ever heard one. So I open up our car and ask Jim, "Are they your pants?" "Yeah, they are." He couldn't find his own. "Can you tell me about anything that was in those pants?" "Oh crap. Yeah, the point that I didn't smoke yesterday." Jim made full admissions to owning both the pants and the drugs while Bob was happily free to go. Jim is such a bro for not throwing his friend under the bus. A dumbass, but still a bro. I was a detective for a few years, assigned to violent crimes investigations. I got called in one night for a male victim that literally was dumped out of a vehicle at the entrance to the emergency room. He had been shot in the side right around the hip area with a shotgun, but was conscious and alert. While talking to him, he wouldn't give any information whatsoever about his name or anything. While in the air, the doctor informed me that when they cut his pants off he had a significant amount of crack in his pocket. He initially stuck to his story and once discharged about a week later he was arrested for the crack. This is where the story takes the turn. He immediately dropped the "those aren't my pants" story, which is more common than anyone could imagine, but still wouldn't give any more information about what happened. He did finally give all his personal information. He was from out of state and couldn't make bond, so after sitting in jail for about 4 months, he finally decided he wanted to talk about what happened. Turns out on the night he was shot, he and some of his associates decided they were going to rob a known drug dealer. To achieve this, they dressed up as federal agents with BDU pants, full uniform style shirts and badges. When they got to the house, they announced they were police and as soon as he grabbed the glass door, the guy on the inside swung open the main door and fired a shotgun through the outer door, striking him. Everyone ran back to the car, jumped in and on the way, one of the other guys gave him clothes to put on so that he didn't show up at the hospital with the uniform style outfit. Every piece of his story was verified through the investigation to include the drug dealer had not replaced his glass door and it was still shattered. Read this in the local paper. I live in a small town in Australia. This guy was out fishing in the bush when an elephant goes running past. So he reports it to the police, who proceed to laugh and ask what he's been smoking. The next day someone came in to report a missing elephant. It turns out some circus elephants had been retired to a local farm. I'm not a law enforcer, but when I was 21 I went to a public park to smoke weed with a group of my friends. I had weed in my car and papers to roll up joints, of which I rolled 3 to split between the 6 of us. While I sat in the car waiting for my friends to get there, I mistrusted a fart and shat my dang pants. This park was about 1.5 miles from my house, so I drove back in a hurry. I was speeding and got pulled on the crossroad between my street and another for going 15 over. The cop approaches my car and, after the typical license and registration, takes a whiff and goes, "What am I smelling?" I make eye contact and tell him, "Sir, I pooped my pants and was speeding home before a date." The officer looked back to his car, leaned his head back in a bit and sniffed, pulled his head out and winced, slapped the side of my car twice and said, "Hurry home son," and let me go. Small miracles, I guess. So, dispatch advises my partner and I of a 911 call, where the caller advises there is a pilot who parked a plane in his yard and then went to the nearby bar. Dispatch advises the caller doesn't speak conversational English and the call was translated via a translation service. Knowing the address is on a lake, I assume there is a mistranslation. Someone probably drove a boat up to his dock and went to the bar. Partner calls me, he's on the shitter and going to be a minute. He assumes the same thing regarding translation that I do. That's cool. I arrive first. Holy crap, it's an actual plane in his driveway, specifically a seaplane. Apparently it was driven up the boat ramp, turned off into his driveway, and shut down. I call my partner. "Yeah, you need to come here and see this crap." Go to the bar. "Who owns the plane?" Drunk guy does. Apparently he was there to visit his friend, landed on the lake, and taxied to his friend's driveway, except he got addresses mixed up apparently, and now he's drunk, so I don't want him to move the plane. Turns out planes are light and he pushed it to the correct driveway. I investigate workplace discrimination complaints. One guy worked for a government morgue. He claimed his boss was stealing embalming tables. Who steals embalming tables, I thought. Turns out, the boss was selling them to funeral homes and pocketing the profit. So I'm patrolling in beach tourist destination, and it's about 2 AM, so I'm on the lookout for drunk drivers. There's a guy swerving a little bit up the road. He was on a back road and there was nobody else around. I decide to check it out. Flip on the lights and the guy pulls over immediately. I start chatting with the guy and he's slurring his words. "Cop, where you coming from?" Guy, "Just heading back to my hotel from the beach." Cop, "Any reason why you're swerving?" Guy, "I'm on some medication from a surgery I recently had and I'm pretty tired. So I'm thinking, okay buddy." I grab his license and registration. I run it and it comes back clean. I take a look in his backseat with my flashlight on the way back. Not only is there 230 packs of beer in the back seat, the floor is absolutely littered with empty beer cans. Cop, "So what's with all the beer in the back?" Guy, "Well, my neighbor really likes that brand of beer and he was house sitting for us, so we are bringing some back to him as a gift." Cop, "So what's with all the empty beer cans on the floor?" Guy, "Well, while we were at the beach the other day we saw part of the beach that was trashed. I couldn't leave the beach like that." Cop, "Alright buddy, you need to step out of the car." So I make him take a breathalyzer and he blows 0.000. So I make him blow again, 0.000. Keep in mind this guy is slurring his words left and right. So I ask him if I can take him back to the hotel and I'll drive his wife back to pick up his car. He agrees. I get to the hotel and the wife was worried sick because he had been out so late. The wife confirms that he's on medication. He goes to sleep and as the wife and I are walking out, I start questioning her. Cop, "I saw a bunch of empty beer cans in the back seat. He drink a lot?" Woman, "Oh no, he insisted we spend an hour of our beach trip cleaning up the beach. He wanted to drop off the cans at the recycling center before we go back home. He doesn't drink at all." Cop, "Interesting. There was 2 cases of beer in the back seat." Woman, "Oh yes, my neighbor absolutely loves the beer. Can't get it where we're from. Easily the most surprised I've ever been." 3 years ago, working in our civil department. Landlord wants his tenants out, says the usual things that set off the BS meter. They're drug users, criminals, thugs, keeping a prisoner in the mother-in-law suite. Landlord himself is a slumlord, says outrageous stuff for all of his tenants he wants to evict. Turns out that it was actually true in this case. Partially, the tenants were a man and his elderly mother. They were keeping the man's developmentally challenged brother padlocked in the mother-in-law suite of the house with no plumbing or electricity. This family had been doing a rent-to-own thing with the landlord for 10 years or so, and only recently stopped paying. Turns out that they had been feeding the brother through the mail slot in the suite's door, and the interior had no furniture besides the most disgusting mattress you can imagine. We don't know how long he had been kept in there, but I have never seen a more revolting place in my entire life. Telling this from the perspective of the person the officer wouldn't have believed. My family is in the car coming home from dinner, and my dad goes to get onto the on-ramp for the freeway. The brake lights of the car in front of him go on, so he slows down. Then he realizes that the car in front of us isn't just braking, they're actively reversing back down the on-ramp. My dad barely had enough time to stop before the car in front of us reversed directly into our car. Airbags deployed. We hopped out of the car, and by some miracle the car behind us was a cop with her dash cam on. Most people don't reverse down on ramps, so without her being there and seeing it, there's no way anyone would have believed that we didn't rear-end the guy. Back when I was working parking enforcement, a man approached me, calm as could be, and told me he'd had to park his car in a loading zone and that it was now on fire. He asked if there was a way to make sure it wasn't ticketed, since he couldn't move it. I figured maybe it was overheating or something, but I checked the loading zone, and sure enough, the engine was straight up on fire. He was mildly surprised when I called 911 to get a fire engine over to make sure the fire didn't spread. I work in air pollution control. One of our actual officers got an anonymous complaint call through the tip line about a body shop that didn't have the right equipment, was operating without a permit, etc. Meet the officer out there to inspect the place and see what's up. As I'm pulling in, the shop's yard is a mess. Random wrecked cars all over the place, bits and pieces of engines and such under tarps, or just casually laying on a pallet. There's a small pile of tires in one corner. All it's missing is a chained up Doberman and a razor wire fence. I was glad I had an officer along. We walk into the shop proper, and it's even more cluttered than the yard. There's bits and pieces of at least 3 different cars in old milk crates, and 2 different vehicles in various states of disassembly on the shop floor. Tell the owner why we're there, and he's super confused. Says he has a paint booth that he loans out to a buddy who does his painting for him, but he doesn't do very much work. We go through the whole speech about changing the filters and such, and the guy is even more confused looking. He swears he just bought new filters for the thing. They're quite expensive, and he says again that he doesn't do all that much paint work. I'm not buying it given the state of the shop and the yard, so I ask to see the booth. He walks us into another building, and there's an absolutely beautiful paint booth in there. Everything is clean and the filters are in good shape. He's got the right kind of paint guns, all his containers are covered, and the ventilation is hooked up properly. There's not the faintest whiff of paint, let alone some sort of odor worth calling the tip line to complain about. I couldn't find anything to cite as a violation, and there wasn't even anything to warn him about. One of the better body shops I've ever been in as far as housekeeping goes. Now we're all confused. The officer asks the guy if anyone from any other agency had been out to visit lately. The guy says no. Then he asks if maybe he fired someone lately, since sometimes former employees who get fired will call to complain and try to get their old boss in trouble. Again the guy says no, just him and his dad that work in the shop, and his buddy that comes to paint. We all scratch our heads trying to figure out who called in the complaint, because there's nothing wrong here. On the way out, the officer casually remarks that he'd like to get his hands on a Camaro like that one over there. That's when the light bulb went off. Turns out the owner of the Camaro was unhappy with the speed of progress on his car. The shop owner had been working on it for free as a favor, and had gotten bogged down with other work, so he hadn't had a chance to finish it. They had apparently argued about it a few days before we got the call, and the rest is history. You have been visited by the Frosty Dogger. A cool summer will come to you only if you comment stay cool, Frosty Dogger. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.